Hi, students. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you got to see the last um, um, video that I shared. And as I'm setting this one up, I want to just talk to you for a minute. Um, so this is our citizenship class, lesson number 2. My name's Tim Ford. Here's my information down here in the lower right-hand corner with my phone number. And remember, anytime I say anything you don't understand or you have questions, please call me or send me a text, and we can get together and try to talk. So last time I went through the process of what it takes to become a citizen. What process do you go through to become a citizen? What's the test like? Where do you go? Those kinds of things. How much you have to wait? Lots of waiting. So that's what we did last time. So this time we're going to start going through what are the questions that they ask when you take a test. So today, let me see if I can get me out of the way here so you can see this. Today we will learn about Today we will learn about how the government is set up. And we're going to look at that through questions numbers 1 through 20 on the test questions. And we're also going to look at how you can study on your own for the 100 questions with an app on your phone. I'll help you learn how to install that on your phone. Okay? So, go on to the next slide here. So the first of the 100 questions is, what is the supreme law of the land? That'll be better. What is the supreme law of the land? It is the Constitution. It's a document that was written a long time ago, back in the 1700s, that set up our government. So what does the Constitution do? Well, I just said it. It sets up the government. Another thing it does is it defines the government. And a third thing it does is it protects basic rights of all Americans. So that's what the Constitution is and what it does. But I want to give you some, so what I want to do is I want to take some time now to go through and talk about how the government is set up, because the Constitution sets up the government. So what did it do? How did it set it up? What kind of government do we have? So that's what I want to talk about next. So our government is set up with 3 branches, 3 parts. There's 3 separate parts to our federal government. And the reason that they set that up that way in the Constitution was so that we could have each part could have some power, okay? So each of these parts has power, but none of them have all the power. So it's the thing right here underneath where it says Constitution, in the center here where it says separation of powers. We want to set it up so that there's separation of powers. There's another term for that as well that we'll talk about in one of the questions later. But I'm going to look first at this section in the center, this part in the center here. So one of the branches, one of the parts of government is the president. And you know our president now is Donald Trump. And you probably know that we have 2 different parties, political parties that disagree with each other on many, many things. There's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So the Democratic Party Barack Obama was a Democrat. So he is no longer president. Now Donald Trump is president. He is a Republican. So there's 2 different parts of government. And we will vote in this November for president again. Joe Biden is a Democrat. He's trying to become president. And Donald Trump is trying to keep being president. So that will happen this November. The president has a vice president. So he's a second in charge. He doesn't really have any power, but he talks to the president a lot, and he tries to help the president any way he can. And if something were to happen to the president, if he were to die or become where he couldn't be a president anymore, the vice president would become the president. Okay? So then there's a third part under this section here. It's called the cabinet. So the president has a vice president, and he also has a cabinet. A cabinet is just a group of people who he assigns, who then will help him make decisions, help him understand things. So the president can't know everything about everything. He can know, President Trump is a businessman, so he can know a lot about business. But he may not know hardly anything about how to build roads or airports or how to move people around on public transport with trains and buses and that kind of thing. So he has what he calls a Secretary of Transportation. And that person gives him advice about how should we set up our transportation in the United States. And there's another one about agriculture and another one about education. So there's about 15 of those people that are all advisors to the president. They give them advice. So if you are new to the country and you know that you hear, oh, my taxes are due on April 15th. I don't think I'm going to do them. I don't think I'm going to turn that in because I don't want to have to pay taxes. I'm not going to tell them I made any money. Well, somebody could come to me and say, oh, that's a bad thing to do. I give you advice. You should turn in your taxes because if you don't, you can never become a citizen. Oh, I better turn in my taxes. Okay. So I get advice. That's what the cabinet members do. They tell the president wise things to do in their areas that they know a lot about. So you have the president, and in the left-hand column, there's a group that's called the Congress. And the Congress are the people who make laws. So they decide what laws are we going to have in our country. So there's two different parts to the Congress. There's two parts to the Congress. There's a Senate and there's a House of Representatives. This word representatives is an important word. So I'm trying to think of a good example. So right here is our three buildings drawn. This is the building that the Congress meets in. This is the White House, where the president has his where he lives and where he has his offices. And this is the Supreme Court building. So those buildings, this building is not the president, but if I see a picture of that building, it represents in my mind the president. If I see a picture of this building, it represents Congress. If I see a picture of this building, it represents the courts. So that's why they put those pictures there. What we do is we have a system of government that's set up. The first three words of the Constitution are we the people. We the people. So our government is set up that the people run the government. So I run the government. When you're a citizen, you run the government. Your friends who are citizens, they run the government. My wife runs the government. Everybody who works for the nations runs the government. The people that you live in the apartments with or on a street with, in a house with, they run the government. It's run by the people. But if there's there's millions of people in the country, we can't come to make a decision for what's best for everybody without having a smaller group of people make those decisions for us. So what we do is I say, I'm going to send this man or this woman to Washington, D.C., and they're going to represent me. And they're going to vote the way I want them to vote. If they don't, I won't send them next time. I'll vote for somebody else. So the senators and the representatives are voted for by the people, as is the president is voted for by the people. They're supposed to represent the American people and what we want in our government. The Senate has two people from each state, so there's 100 senators because there's 50 states. The House of Representatives, there's 435 of those, but they represent a given area on a map. So it's by how many people live in that area. So there's 435. There's more from some states than others. And they just represent a specific geographic area on a map. The third column is the courts. So the Congress makes the laws. Let me go back to that. The Congress makes the laws. The Senate will write a law, and the House of Representatives will write a law, and then they have to get together and decide together what's best. Right now, there's more Republican senators than there are Democratic, so the Senate is Republican. The House of Representatives is Democratic. So often they disagree about what the law should say. So they try to write a law, and then they send it, once it's written, they send it to the president. And the president can say yes to the law and sign it, and then it becomes law. Or he can say no to the law and he can veto it, and it doesn't become law. If he does that, then it goes back to the Senate, and they have to get 2/3 instead of only half the people voting for it. They have to get 2/3 of the people who vote for it. And if they do, then it becomes law. Oops, went too far. So that's how the Congress and the president have a separation of powers. Neither one of them can have power over the other. It goes back and forth. And then the third is the courts. Now the courts are the people who decide, is the law good? Is the law good? And by good, what is the supreme law of the land? The Constitution. So does this law do what the Constitution says we're supposed to do? That's what that's about. So the courts decide, are the laws good or bad? They also do some other things, and we'll talk about that when we get to that question. But that's their big thing that they do. So these people make a law. The president can say yes or no. Congress makes a law. The president says yes or no. The courts then can say no. So if they pass a law that's not good, if the Congress passes a law, the president signs it into law, and then somebody comes along and says, that law is not fair. It's not what the Constitution says. Back in the 1800s, we had a law that said one man can own another man. So a white man can own a black man. And people went to the courts and said, that's not fair. And then we ended up having a war about it. And we decided that it wasn't fair. It wasn't right. So for a while, some of the states said, we still think it's right. And some of the states said we didn't. So then they fought about it. And the people who say that slavery was wrong won. And then we had a time when only white people could vote. Black people, even though they became citizens, even though they were free, they weren't citizens and they couldn't vote. So then we had to have another time happen where the court said that's not right, and they had to create a new law, and they had to have a constitutional amendment about it so that we could have everybody have the right to vote. So that's how the whole system works. The government system works. So this is another graphic. Notice it's still got legislative at the top, that's Congress. Executive at the top, that's president. Judicial at the top, that's the courts. They mean the same thing. But notice they have the same building that represents them. Okay? They make the law, he signs the law, and they decide if the law is constitutional. So that's another deal here. Now, this one has a little more information. It's going to be in your questions. So senators, you'll see, are 2 senators from each state, and a number of congressmen based on, I said that already, but there's senators are elected for 6 years, congressmen are elected for 2 years, representative are elected for 2 years. The president's elected for 4 years at a time, and he can only be in office for 8 years. He can't be in more than that, just 2 terms. The congressman, the Congress, and the president are voted for. The judges are appointed by the president. So the president appoints them, and they can be in power, they can be in office for life. Okay? So right now we have one of our judges that's on the Supreme Court, which is the highest court, the Supreme Court. One of our judges has been there for over 40 years. Her name's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's almost 90 years old, and recently she's had some health issues. But every time they say Ruth Bader Ginsburg's in the hospital, but she always pulls through and does well. So she's a remarkable lady. I've read some things and watched some documentaries about her. So there's some things I disagree with her about wholeheartedly, but that's okay. That's what America's about, being able to disagree. Republicans and Democrats, right? So the next question, I already gave this. Now I'm going to go through some more questions, go through questions number 3 through 20. The first question was, what's the supreme law of the land? The Constitution. What's the Constitution do is number 2. What's the Constitution do? It sets up the government. The idea of self-government, number 3, is in the first 3 words of the Constitution. What are these words? We the people. So the reason I went through that explanation of the government is so that these questions, as we're going through them, you'll understand better, okay, the way things happen. Okay? So number 4 is, what is an amendment? So an amendment is a change to the Constitution. I told you that we had a Constitution that said all men are created equal, but then it said that only white men can vote. So we had to change the Constitution because all men are created equal, not just white men. Okay? Number 5, what do we call the first 10 amendments of the Constitution? We call those the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights. So they wrote the Constitution, they realized that they put a lot of things in the Constitution about what we could and couldn't do, but we didn't put anything in there to say what the government can't do to us. Okay? So there's a Bill of Rights. What is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? So they gave you a bunch of them, but freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and freedom to petition the government. Freedom of speech just means you can say anything you want to about the government or about your neighbor. Nobody can tell you can't say something. Now, what it doesn't mean is that you can go into a crowded theater and yell, fire! Because that would be wrong, because people can get hurt as they try to leave. So it's not saying that you can do anything you want to with your speech, but it is saying the government can't the government can't keep you from talking bad about them. The next one is freedom of religion. Everybody has the freedom to, and it's one of the questions later, but you can worship any God you want to or no God at all. Assembly means getting together. So we have the freedom in America to assemble together anytime we want to. Now, that's why some people are protesting about what's going on during coronavirus, because they're saying the government can't tell us not to get together. But that's really the government saying you're going to kill people if you get together. So it's yeah, it's been an interesting time because we do have that freedom to assemble, to get together in groups. The government can't tell us not to. Freedom of the press. The press are people that tell us what's going on in the news. In many countries, the news is dictated, is controlled by the government. So the government tells everybody what's going on, and so everybody thinks what the government thinks. And the last one is freedom to petition the government. So if you think the government's doing something wrong, you have the freedom to go in and talk to them about it. For many, many years in this country, the presidents held time when citizens could come in and talk to them. You didn't have to have an appointment. He'd have office hours where anybody who wanted to could come in and tell them what they wanted to tell them. So that doesn't happen anymore, but that was for a long time. Number 7, how many amendments does the Constitution have? Some of these questions are just memorization. You don't have to know anything about them. There's 27. What did the Declaration of Independence do? I'm going to jump off of here for a second and go to a map. Okay. So this is a map. You might recognize this is Dallas, Fort Worth right here. 414 South Purdue. That's got a little dot by it. That's our For the Nations building. There's another dot behind it. That's one of my daughter's houses in Dallas. And then there's a dot in Austin for my son and a dot in Beaumont for my daughter. So that's where my kids live. And 3 of my grandchildren live here. 2 of my grandchildren live here. And 2 of my grandchildren live here. So I have 7 grandchildren. But if I zoom, we call it zooming out, so you can see more, there's all of the United States, right? From Maine to California, Maine up here in the upper right, California on the left, Florida down in the lower right, and Texas right in the middle, toward the bottom in the middle. So when the Constitution was written, let's look at number 8 again. What did the Declaration of Independence do? The Declaration of Independence, when it was written, all the people in the United States lived in 13 of these states, and they were called colonies. And all of them touched the Atlantic Ocean except for Pennsylvania. So Maine was part of Massachusetts, so that was 1. New Hampshire was 1. Connecticut and Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Those are the 13 colonies. And these 13 colonies were here on this big piece of land. And to the left of them was all Native Americans. Okay? But if we look over here, I didn't expect it to twist like that. If we look over here, whoa, what just happened? My maps did something different than it normally does, than it used to do. Let me scroll around. Okay, so the United States is here, right? These are the 13 colonies. I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see my cursor moving over it. And then there's all this ocean, this Atlantic Ocean, and all the way over here is the United Kingdom. Well, these people didn't have any rights of their own. They were controlled by the United Kingdom. So the United Kingdom told them what they could do, what they couldn't do. They took taxes from them, and they were under the control of the United Kingdom. So the people in the United States, or it wasn't the United States then, the British colonies, because Britain, the United Kingdom is also called Britain. The British, they were colonies of Britain, so they were the British colonies. These people said, we don't like this. we create tea, and when we have to send it to them, we don't get anything from it. We make tobacco, we have to send it to them. We grow cotton, we have to send it to them. And we're not gaining from it. They're taking all of our resources. So they said, no more. They didn't want to be a part of the United Kingdom anymore. They wanted to be their own country. So that's when it says, what did the Declaration of Independence do? It declared independence from Great Britain. Declared means say with emphasis, say loudly, we are independent from you. We are no longer part of Great Britain. That's what it said. So, what are two rights in the Declaration of Independence? The ones that we think of first usually are life and liberty. And then the third one is a pursuit of happiness. We don't have the right for happiness, but we have the right to try to be happy, to pursue happiness. Next question, what is freedom of religion? So remember, there was a Declaration of Independence. That happened. And then there was a war between Great Britain and the colonies. The colonies won that war, and they became their own country. And when they became their own country, they wrote the Constitution. And then they wrote the amendments, and one of the amendments is said you have freedom of religion. So freedom of religion is you can practice any religion. So if you want to be Buddhist, you can be Buddhist. If you want to be Christian, you can be Christian. If you want to be Lutheran Christian, you can be Lutheran Christian. If you want to be Catholic, you can be Catholic. If you want to be Muslim, you can be Muslim. If you want to worship squirrels, you can worship squirrels. It doesn't matter what religion you want to. Or you can not practice religion at all. You don't have to practice religion. You can say there is no God, if that's what you want to say. So that's freedom of religion. The government can't tell you who to worship or what to worship. That's a decision you make on your own. And let me go back to that. One reason that that's there is because in Great Britain, there was a government required religion. Everybody had to be a part of the Church of England. And some of the people who came to the United States came to get away from that because they didn't want to be a part of that religion. So what's the economic system in the United States? Economic system is the capitalist economy. And what that means is that we're a market-driven economy. So if I bring my orange cup that maybe some of you have seen before that I drink coffee out of all day, and somebody says, I want to buy your orange cup from you, I can say, sure, you can buy my orange cup from me. It'll be $150. And they will say, but I can buy one online for much, much cheaper than that. Okay, buy it online. That's a capitalist economy. You can buy for what you think something is worth. If I try to sell you something, you don't think it's worth that, you don't buy it. So everybody tries to get the best made product for the least amount of money out there so they can make a profit, because a lot of people will buy their product from them. So the next question, what is the rule of law? The rule of law. So who makes the laws? The Congress makes the laws. Who signs the law? The president signs the law. Then who decides if the law is fair? The courts decide if the law is fair. But there's a rule of law in the United States. And it has to do with who must obey the law. So what is the rule of law? Everyone must follow the law. No one is above the law. So when our children were young, we had a bedtime for them. It was maybe, I don't remember what time it was. Let's say it was 9 o'clock. And they had to go to bed at 9 o'clock because they had to go to school early in the morning. So we wanted them to go to bed at 9 o'clock, get a good night's sleep. But we didn't go to bed at 9 o'clock. We went to bed later. Well, at some point, our children were like, why do you get to stay up later than I do? Because in our home, there wasn't a rule of law. I got to make laws for them. It was different. But in the United States, if the Congress makes a law and the president signs a law and the courts okay the law, everybody has to follow the law. The president, the governor, the mayor, me, my children, everybody has to follow the law. No one, as we say, no one is above that. No one can say, I don't have to do it because I'm too important. Everyone must follow the law. Number 14, what stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? Remember we talked about separation of powers? It's also called checks and balances. So there's the three parts of government. There's the Congress, there's the president, and there's the courts, right? All of them have different powers, and they check and balance each other. So if I think that you're doing something wrong, then I will say it, and then we'll have to figure it out. So we have to make compromises with each other. Who is in charge of the executive branch? I'm going to get some questions that are getting repetitive here. Who is in charge of the executive branch? The president. Who makes federal laws? The Congress, which remember we had two parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. What are two parts of the U.S. Congress? The Senate and the House of Representatives. How many U.S. senators are there? Remember, there was 2 for each state. There's 50 states, so there are 100 senators. We elect a senator for how many years? 6. Who is one of your state's senators? So Texas has 2 senators. You only need to know one of their names. The 2 senators are Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. So that's all we're going to cover today on the test. But I do want to talk to you about, ask you this question. Can you study for this test on your own? And the answer to that question is yes, you can if you have a smartphone. And I'm going to show you how now. Okay? So that's what we're going to do next. I move my little picture over here because I know I'll be in the way. Put me right on top of the Statue of Liberty. How's that look? No. Okay. So you're going to have one of two. You're going to have a smartphone. You'll have one of 2 different types of smartphone, either an Android phone or an iPhone. So if you have an Android phone, you'll open Google Play on your Android phone. Now, what you can do on this is right now, if you want to try to follow along with me, you can. But what you'll do is you'll hit pause on the video, go get your phone, open up Google Play on it, okay? Or the App Store on an iPhone. So when you get there, you're going to search for USCIS test. I'll give you a hint. The one you're looking for is going to have a logo that looks very similar to that one right there. It's this picture I have up. Okay, it won't have my circle in the middle, but it'll look similar to that. Okay, next thing you do is you find the app. So there'll be a bunch of them listed on your phone. And you'll find the app that has this picture with 2020, the Statue of Liberty, the passport. It won't have For the Nations on it. or my picture. Okay. And then you download and you open that app on your phone. Once you have it open, you'll click settings. Okay. And you'll look at the flashcard order, and you want this to be random. Okay. If it's not random, click it once to change it to random. And then you can practice the test. What I'm going to do next time, I will show you how to use that app on your phone. I'll have it on my screen and you can look at it. I'll go run through this one more time with you next time, and then I'll show you how to use it on your screen. Okay? So that's it for today. I hope you were able to see things and understand. But I do want to let you know, I'm going to go back to that first slide. Thought I copied it onto here. I do want to let you know that if you have questions, or if you want to talk to me about any of this, or if you've gotten a letter in the mail recently that says you have to come in for your test, let me know. Text me, and we'll try to get together, or we'll talk on the phone, and we'll work through we'll work through faster getting you ready for the test. So anyway, I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.